On October 1, 2025, the world stopped for a moment as news spread. Jane Goodall was gone. At 91 years old, the woman who had dedicated her life to bridging the gap between humans and nature passed away peacefully in California while on tour. She left behind not only groundbreaking science, but also a moral compass for the planet. Jane Goodall had become a household name, her very identity synonymous with chimpanzees, conservation, and hope. Financially, she was never among the wealthiest of public figures. At the time of her passing, her estimated net worth was around $5 million, modest by celebrity standards. But what Goodall carried was something money could not buy: respect, admiration, and a global movement. Her wealth was measured in forests saved, species protected, and generations inspired. When she walked onto a stage, children, scientists, and heads of state listened in equal measure. She had transformed a childhood dream into a life that reshaped science, ethics, and our sense of responsibility toward the natural world. Early life. Jane Goodall was born Valerie Jane Morris-Goodall on April 3, 1934, in Hampstead, London. The world she entered was trembling with uncertainty. The shadow of World War II loomed large. Yet within her family home, a different world blossomed, one filled with books, animals, and encouragement. Her father, Loyd Benedict Goodall, was an engineer and businessman, pragmatic and reserved. Her mother, Margaret Myfanwe Josephine, nicknamed Vanne, was a novelist, storyteller, and dreamer. From her mother Jane, inherited an unshakable imagination and compassion. Jane had one younger sister, Pamela, Pip Goodall, with whom she shared a close bond. Pip often recalled how Jane's fascination with animals was relentless. At age 1, Jane's father gave her a toy chimpanzee, a stuffed doll named Jubilee. Many expected her to fear it, but instead Jane carried it everywhere. Friends and relatives thought the attachment odd, but for Jane, Jubilee was a spark. From the very beginning, Jane showed signs of being a keen observer. At age 4, she hid in a chicken coop for nearly 5 hours, waiting patiently to see how hens laid eggs. Her frantic family searched everywhere, only for Jane to emerge wide-eyed, clutching her discovery. It was her first field study, long before she knew the word ethology. Her formal schooling took place in England, first at local schools and later at Upland School. Though she was bright, the times were not forgiving to young women who dreamed beyond marriage and homemaking. But Jane had other plans. She devoured books like Tarzan of the Apes and the story of Dr. Dolittle. She confessed later in life that she secretly envied Tarzan's Jane, believing she could have been a better companion to him in the jungle. Education, in the traditional sense, would take a back seat at first. Financial constraints meant she could not afford university immediately. Instead, she pursued secretarial studies, practical training that would soon open an unexpected path. Personal life. Jane's personal life was deeply intertwined with her work. She married twice and had one child, but her greatest lifelong partner was arguably the natural world. Marriage to Hugo van Laak. In 1964, at the height of her chimpanzee research, Jane married Hugo van Laak, a Dutch wildlife photographer sent by National Geographic to document her work. Their shared passion created both romance and partnership. Together, they filmed, wrote, and raised awareness of the fragile world of chimpanzees. They had one son in 1967, Hugo Eric Louis van Laak, affectionately called Grub. Unlike most children, Grub grew up in and around Gom, surrounded not by playgrounds but forests. Though Jane adored him, the challenges of a marriage built on constant travel and demanding work proved too great. By 1974, Jane and Hugo divorced, though they remained friendly. Marriage to Derek Bryson. A year later, Jane married Derek Bryson, the Tanzanian head of national parks and a parliament member. Derek understood Jane's mission and used his position to protect Gom Stream National Park, ensuring research could continue uninterrupted. Tragically, he died of cancer in 1980. Jane never married again. Family life and beliefs. Jane's son Grub built a quiet life outside the spotlight. Jane became a grandmother later in life, but rarely spoke in detail about her family. shielding them from the intensity of public life. Spiritually, Jane walked her own path. Raised in a Christian household, she grew into a woman of profound but non-institutional faith. She often described a sense of awe and deep spirituality when among forests and animals. She believed in God, but also in a broader spiritual unity that transcended religious boundaries. Other works and passions. Jane authored over 24 books, ranging from rigorous studies, The Chimpanzees of Gam, to memoirs, Reason for Hope, and children's literature. She became a sought-after lecturer, giving more than 300 talks a year at her peak. Her greatest legacy outside research was founding the Jane Goodall Institute 1977, and later Roots and Shoots 1991, a global youth program now in over 100 countries. Her goal was not simply to study animals, but to empower humans, especially the young, to fight for a better coexistence with nature. Professional career. Jane Goodall's professional story reads like legend. Meeting Louis Leakey. In 1957, after working as a secretary, Jane saved enough money to travel to Kenya. There, a fateful meeting with paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey changed everything. Leakey believed that understanding chimpanzees could illuminate the origins of humanity, and he believed Jane, untrained but deeply intuitive, was the right person to lead the mission. Arrival at Gam. In July 1960, Jane stepped into Gam Stream Reserve, now a national park, in Tanzania. She had no advanced degree, no formal training, and only her mother as her chaperone in those early months. What she did have was patience, intuition, and courage. Slowly, through hours of observation, she broke barriers. Unlike most scientists of her time, Jane named the chimpanzees rather than numbering them. She called them David Greybeard, Flo Goliath. Critics accused her of anthropomorphism, but Jane saw something scientists had long denied. Chimpanzees had personalities, emotions, and societies. Groundbreaking discoveries. Her research yielded discoveries that shocked the scientific world. Tool use. She witnessed David Greybeard stripping twigs to fish termites, the first recorded non-human use of tools. "We must redefine tool or redefine man," Louis Leakey famously remarked. Hunting and meat eating. Chimps were not strict vegetarians, but cooperative hunters. Social complexity. Chimps formed alliances, displayed affection, jealousy, grief, and even waged territorial wars. Culture. Behaviors varied among groups, suggesting chimpanzees had their own cultural traditions. Expanding her role. By the 1980s, Jane left day-to-day research to focus on global advocacy. She realized the forests were shrinking and chimpanzee populations collapsing. Science alone was not enough. Activism was essential. Through the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots, she became one of the world's most recognizable conservationists. She spoke at the UN, advised governments, and inspired millions of young activists. She was honored with countless awards: the Kyoto Prize, UN Messenger of Peace 2002, the Damehood DBE by Queen Elizabeth II 2004, and over 50 honorary doctorates. House tour and car collection. Unlike many icons, Jane lived with striking simplicity. Her residences were modest: a home in Bournemouth, England, another base in Tanzania near Gam, and a cabin-like retreat in the US, where she often stayed while touring. None were lavish estates. They were functional spaces filled with books, photographs, and mementos from her travels. Jane never flaunted luxury cars. She was often chauffeured during tours, but when she did own vehicles, they were practical. Rugged Land Rovers during her Gam years, reliable sedans later in life. There is no record of her indulging in sports cars or extravagant collections. For Jane, status was measured in trees planted, not horsepower. Jane's academic path defied tradition. She had no undergraduate degree when she began her research, but her meticulous notes and publications impressed Cambridge University enough to admit her directly to a PhD program in 1962. Her dissertation, Behavior of the Free-Ranging Chimpanzee, submitted in 1965, remains a cornerstone of primatology. She became only the 8th person at Cambridge to earn a PhD without first earning a bachelor's degree. Her case stands as proof that passion and evidence can sometimes outweigh credentials. Cause of death. On October 1st, 2025, Jane Goodall died in California while on a lecture tour. The cause was reported as natural causes, a peaceful end after a life of relentless travel and tireless advocacy. She was 91. Tributes poured in globally. The UN called her a voice of conscience for humanity. Conservationists declared her a guiding light. Thousands of young activists lit candles and planted trees in her honor. Her death was not an end, but a passing of the torch. As Jane herself once said, "What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." Jane Goodall's life was not about wealth, glamour, or comfort. It was about seeing what others overlooked, that animals feel, that forests matter, and that humans are not separate from nature but part of it. She taught us that one woman, beginning with no degree and a dream, could alter science, shift ethics, and inspire the world. Her story is not just biography, it is a call to action. And as long as the forests echo with the calls of chimpanzees, the spirit of Jane Goodall lives on.